The following is a special presentation of NJN, live coverage of Governor Jim Florio's State of the State Address.
Good afternoon, I'm Kent Manahan, and welcome back to NJN's live coverage of Governor Florio's final State of the State Address, his fourth and last speech for 1994 to a joint session of the legislature, a time to tout the accomplishments of his term in office. Here in our NJN studios, I am joined by our analyst, Republican Roger Bodman, Democrat Jim McQueeney. Thanks again for being with us this afternoon, gentlemen. What do we expect to hear from the governor this afternoon, Roger?
Well, as I said earlier, Kent, really, it's a gubernatorial swan song. I mean, it's a chance for the governor to try to sum up his administration, to lay claim to what he believes are his accomplishments, to cite those accomplishments, and I think to put forth a little bit of a warning to his successor and to the newly sworn-in members of the legislature. In this case, he's going to discuss property taxes and what he believes to be the overburdening of those taxes on the people of New Jersey and the poor trend lines that he believes are taking place. So I think he's going to say, here's what I've done. I've tried to do a good job. We've disagreed. Interestingly, he made some comparisons not only with former Governor Cahill, who was the last one-term governor that this state had, but also with Dan Reeves, the football Giants coach, who he suggests that it's almost like going into the game at halftime and then determining that the game is over. He had more plays to run, but he didn't get a chance to run them.
Of course, we've been supplied with an early copy of this speech, so we have the benefit of knowing what the governor is going to say.
I think also picking up on the Cahill reference, it was 20 years ago where Cahill, Governor Bill Cahill, was in very much the same circumstances. Defeated.
He lost a primary.
He lost, right, but was not going forward. Defeated incumbent governor, having to give a speech like this on the eve before his successor comes in, and it's a disappointing circumstance to have to do this. You didn't want to give this speech this way as a swan song, to use Roger's phrase. But on the other hand, it's also a little bit drawing a line in the sand. I mean, the speech was a little bit competitive, even still, basically saying here that what Bill Cahill said 20 years ago still applies to a large degree. Property tax reductions to the average property taxpayer still need to be brought under control, and that's the measurement. People in politics don't want to know how you build a clock. They want to know what time it is from their elected officials, and that is the same thing. The bottom line, property taxes. And I think by saying that, he's also saying to a degree, I didn't get the chance to finish that, to use the Reeves analogy, but here someone else is coming on who will have the imperative to have to try to deal with that.
He sort of sets it as a goal, I would guess, but he's gracious in this speech, Ken. He suggests
he acknowledges the governor-elect.
The governor-elect. He literally says that normally these speeches, and they are essentially wish lists for the year ahead. Here's what I'd like to accomplish. Here's what I'd like to do. And in fact, he says, for obvious reasons, this is not a wish list, but the only wish he has is to wish Christy Whitman the best of luck. And I thought that was quite gracious.
He also acknowledges, frankly, like Cahill, who largely was defeated because of the income tax proposal that he proposed in his own primary by Sandman, he too was defeated, and as he says in his speech, I bear the scars of trying to do this also.
He also says, though, I want to be remembered for the accomplishments, no matter how difficult they were to have gotten to be made.
Yeah, I think you see, or you have seen over this past weekend, a number of editorials around the state where they've looked past the tax aura or the tax animus at Florio and looked at a lot of what he's done. And a lot of the newspapers around the state, and I would note particularly the Bergen Record of Hackensack this past weekend, said by and large it was a very productive term on what he did, and also had a large degree of cooperation from a legislature of the opposite party in the last part of that term.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. And I am going to send it now to my colleague Larry Stupnagel, who is standing by live for the Governor's State of the State Address. Larry?
Kent, we are now here in the Assembly Chambers where Governor Jim Florio is preparing to make his way in to deliver his fourth and final State of the State message. The governor has arrived. He's being escorted by members of the legislature right now. You can see him walking in, being warmly received here in this largely Republican chamber. One of the people that the governor will also be shaking hands with here in a moment. We're shaking hands with Senator Joe Palaia of Monmouth County, legislative aides. And in just a moment, he's going over to shake hands with former Governor William Cahill, New Jersey's only other one-term governor, modern times governor. Cahill was defeated in a primary. Florio is the first governor to be defeated in a general election. Shaking hands here with Donald E. Francesco, the Senate President, and Chuck Haitayan, the Assembly Speaker. Exchanging pleasantries with the two men, Donald Seco, Haitayan's Chief of Staff. A warm round of applause now. The bleachers here are filled with supporters of the governor, members of the governor's cabinet. Various members of the state's congressional delegation are also here today. That's an extended applause that Jim Florio is receiving here for his final State of the State message. I don't recall any of his other previous messages where he received such a warm reception. And the Senate President now is trying to bring some order to the proceedings here. The governor, too, appears to be moved by this. Members of the governor's staff are leading this prolonged round of applause, but there are also Republicans who are joining in this tribute to Jim Florio.
The Governor of the State of New Jersey, the Honorable Jim Florio. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, Senate President, members of the legislature, ladies and gentlemen, I particularly want to congratulate the new legislature with a special emphasis on the newly elected members of the legislature. I want to also acknowledge some distinguished guests that we have here in the audience. I'm told, I saw Governor Cahill, I see Congressman Andrews is here. I'm told that Senator Laudenberg is here as well, and Senator Congressman Menendez, I believe, is here as well. And my son Christopher is here. Ladies and gentlemen, today is the day that I come before you to deliver my fourth State of the State address. I'd hoped that this would be the midpoint in my time as governor. I feel a bit like Coach Dan Reeves would feel if he took the Giants into the locker room at halftime for a halftime talk and then found out that the game was over. I know that he, too, undoubtedly would have more plays to run and more things that he wanted to get done. But I stand here before you filled with pride in what this administration has achieved, and prouder still because we did what we did in some very hard times. We refused to let the flame of opportunity be snuffed out by a national recession. We kindled it. We nurtured it. We kept it glowing by putting our heads together and coming up with some new ideas. We've got some results that we can talk about with pride here today. State government workforce that is smaller and yet more efficient, smaller by nearly 10,000 people. And we didn't just slam the brakes on a dangerous spending trend. We did a U-turn and decreased the share of state revenue that goes to operating the bureaucracy, while we increase the share that goes out to people at the local level in the form of school aid and county and municipal assistance. We are turning welfare into a way up, not a way of life. Under this administration, the state of New Jersey finally has ended the embarrassment of defending a flawed and unfair way of paying for our schools. We have instituted pioneering healthcare reforms to make sure that everyone has access to quality, affordable care, not just the lucky ones among us. You in the legislature and I have had our share of disagreements from time to time. But when it came to passing measures to keep New Jersey working, we put jobs and security for our people ahead of party politics, and that was a good thing. That enabled us to help home buyers, helped us to assist college students, allowed us to expand the Transportation Trust Fund, turn the Economic Development Authority into a powerhouse for developing small businesses. We launched the Camden Initiative and other projects for other cities all across this state to try to create jobs and rebuild hope. And we didn't just enjoy the Jersey Shore these past 4 summers. We acted in the off seasons to protect and to preserve it for the future. The summer of 1993 will be remembered as the best summer in modern history. We found a stable funding source for shore preservation projects, and we ended the gridlock that was preventing adoption of sane, sensible rules to be able to protect runaway coastal development. And in an action that is now being repeated in cities and states all across this nation, we said yes to public safety and no to the special interests and fought to enact the nation's toughest ban on military assault weapons. And, as significantly, we kept it in place when the gun lobby came this close to repealing it. If there was a price, a political price to be paid, it was worth it. Tough laws coupled with our determination to put more police on the beat in our neighborhoods made it very clear that the people of New Jersey are standing up to violence and protecting our most precious resource, our families and our children. And after a decade of speculation, We got back to the old ideal of investing for the long haul. We invested in people with a fair minimum wage, the highest in the nation, and pioneering efforts in job training. And we invested in our businesses, providing capital and technical know-how. And we invested in our future by creating things like our New Jersey Corporation for Advanced Technology, New Jersey CAT. And making sure that we will be the first state in the nation wired with fiber optic cable. The information highway will be a reality, and milepost number 1 will be right here in New Jersey. Ladies and gentlemen, I owe a great deal to all the people without whom these accomplishments never could have been realized. People who left peaceful lives behind them to come into this administration and devote themselves to the sometimes thankless task of public service. I'm especially proud of the men and women of my cabinet, and I want them to stand there here for me to publicly say thank you. I also want to thank the people in and out of government who spoke out for change and sometimes were willing to take on the entrenched defenders of the status quo. Not because there would be glory, not because there was any monetary reward, but because it was the right thing to do. And to the people who worked hard at my side, to those who sent me nice letters, to those who greeted Lucinda and I as we made our way around the state, and to those whose names we will never know, but who believed in what it is that we were trying to do, I want to thank you very much for the support. And of course, to Lucinda, no one could have asked for a better, more supportive partner. I'm a little biased, but I happen to think she's one of the best first ladies the state has ever had. In a traditional state of the state message, this would be the part where I would go over the wish list, all the things that I wanted to accomplish in the next year. For reasons that are rather obvious, I have no list here today. I guess my only wish is simply that Governor-elect Whitman have all the support and the cooperation that she needs from all of us so that she can carry this state forward. We had a spirited campaign, and there were the share of differences that is usually the case in such campaigns. But now is the time for all of us to come together and to make sure that the state advances, and I wish her well. I want to devote the rest of my address to a single topic: property taxes. New Jersey's over-reliance on property taxes is the single most important problem that our state faces. That's why we have devoted so much of our efforts in the past 4 years to tackling property taxes. And that's why we can't afford to stop now, any of us. I've talked a few minutes ago about the investments that we've made in the past 4 years. But if we fail to continue on the path of property tax reform, we will stifle continued investment and the growth that we need to make this state a good place, and that will be our responsibility if we do that. It would be the ultimate sad irony if, as the national recession finally lifts, business and residential investment in New Jersey slowed down because of backsliding on property taxes. When President Eisenhower left office, he spoke of the growing danger of the military-industrial complex. My message is closer to home, but please take it in the same spirit. Because property taxes are the single biggest barrier to improving the quality of life in New Jersey. They raise the cost of doing business, putting our state at a competitive disadvantage. They reduce the profit margins of businesses, especially small businesses. They discourage expansion. They raise the cost of housing, whether you own your home or rent. Ending this dependency will save money, lots of it. And doing so is entirely within our own grasp. Resolving this problem doesn't require help from Washington or any place else. It's right here, if we have the will to finish the job. As I've traveled over the state these past 4 years, I would often hear people say things like, you know, when I used to make $100 a week, I could save more than I can today. Now, there are lots of reasons for that, and many of them are not within the control of the state of New Jersey. But one of the biggest reasons is property taxes. Over the past couple of decades, we've done a lot to counteract problems left over from the past, cleaning up our air and our water problems, to the point where we've become a national model, paving the way with reforms in so many areas that New Jersey is looked at by the rest of the nation as an example of good things in a lot of different areas. But property taxes are an example of something we've always done and still do a bit differently from most other places. And the difference is not something that we should be proud of. It's been written that New Jersey's tax structure is highly unusual. Well, that's a charitable way to put it. The truth is that we consistently rank right near the top in the nation in property taxes. Whether you measure them as a proportion of a total tax revenue or as a percentage of aggregate state income. Only 3 states rely more on property taxes than we do, and none of them has a sales tax, and one has no income tax. In the 1980s, our over-reliance upon property taxes increased. For a lot of people in New Jersey, property taxes doubled, eating away at our savings, threatening our homes, robbing hard-working, middle-class people of the freedom to dream and to plan for the future for their families. That's why this administration declared war on property taxes. It was very gratifying to me when the Nonpartisan Public Affairs Research Institute said that these 4 years represent the most vigorous attack on the problem since the adoption of the state personal income tax. We attacked property taxes in 4 different ways. 1, we increased state school aid from the state back to the school districts to relieve the burden on homeowners. 2, The state took over the cost of welfare and other social services that used to be paid by municipalities and counties, which of course took the money from homeowners through property taxes. And we've begun the same process, with the cost of court systems, again, which will be helpful. 3, we place caps on what local governments could spend, just like the caps that we placed on state government. And 4, we expanded direct relief to taxpayers by changing the homestead rebate so that, for a while at least, the people who needed help the most got it. Let's for one moment just talk straight about taxes. You know, when people or businesses sit down and look at the numbers, they easily conclude that the property tax is the most regressive, least fair tax that we have in New Jersey. If people think this is a high tax state, it's because of property taxes, not the income tax, not business taxes. The people of New Jersey are entitled to an honest debate over how to raise the money we need and how much we need to raise, not the empty rhetoric of false choices, like are you for taxes or against them. We need to continue the real discussion of how to most fairly spread the burden, rather than to pretend that the burden or the discussion can be totally avoided. Property taxes in New Jersey affect so many parts of our lives, from how big your mortgage is, to how long you sit in traffic on your way to work, whether your children have a nice park to play in down the street, and whether the Jersey Shore remains a precious resource with clean, safe water. Why is that the case? Because we rely upon property taxes for too many things. First off, property taxes have been the primary way we pay for schools, and what a mistake that was. That led to such an uneven spread in the amount one community has available for education compared to its neighbor, that the Supreme Court had to step in and declare the whole arrangement illegal and unconstitutional. In effect, we were telling the children of New Jersey that the quality of education that they would get depended upon the accident of what town they happened to live in. But there's more to the property tax problem than even just that. I've often told the story about the time in 1989 when a man walked up to Lucinda and I when we were at a picnic in Elizabeth. The man was crying. There was a man in his 60s in tears as he told us that he thought he was going to lose his home. Not because of his mortgage, he had paid that off. It was his property taxes. They were more than he could afford. So at the same time that we've been cheating our children by this over-reliance upon property taxes, we've been robbing our homeowners. And it doesn't even stop there. The fellow in Elizabeth that I was talking about was worried about losing a home that he'd lived in for many years. But what about the young couple just starting out? A young husband and wife, both working, and still the American dream of owning a home is out of reach for them, in many cases because of high property taxes. Now, we've taken some good steps to change that situation with our mortgage assistance programs for middle-class families, particularly our first-time homebuyers program. But I don't think it will mean much if we don't finally get around to ending the over-reliance upon property taxes, because that expense alone is often the biggest obstacle to being able to afford a home, especially for young couples. So we see that property taxes play a crucial role in the quality of education for our youngsters, and in whether their parents can buy a home, and whether their grandparents can afford to stay in one. If those were the only reasons to act, they'd be more than enough. But they're not. This over-reliance upon property taxes threatens our entire quality of life in lots of other ways, too. It forces communities to compete with each other to try to attract more sources of property tax revenue. This is what we speak of as the rateable chase, where you try to attract more people, more businesses, so that each of them can pay more property taxes, and it is hoped thereby that you can lower the bill for everyone. This rateable chase makes as much sense as it would to analyze our nation's drug problem and conclude that the need that we have is for more drugs. Towns go after businesses, office buildings, developments of all kinds, whatever they can get their hands on. The result? A serene suburb turns into a mini metropolis. Green, open spaces disappear, gobbled up because a building is a better rateable than a park is. Main Street becomes a virtual parking lot where cars spend more time sitting than moving. We go from growth to gridlock. And worse yet, this bidding war doesn't solve any problems. In fact, it makes things worse. And you don't have to be an expert in government to know that. If you've ever watched a dog chase its tail, you get some sense of what this is really all about. When towns aren't competing with each other to see who can give a developer the best deal, towns are trying to figure out how to pay for the added strain on their police departments or their school systems, or even their ability to deal with garbage. That's right. Even the high cost of garbage disposal in New Jersey has its roots in our over-reliance upon property taxes. I'm very proud that this administration kept the promise that we made to end the dumping of sludge in the Atlantic Ocean off New Jersey. But the fact of the matter is that we were poisoning our water and jeopardizing our tourism industry for an embarrassingly long time because we weren't willing to face up to the costs of finding better and safer ways of such disposal. And one reason for that was that the towns didn't want to ask residents already overburdened by property taxes to pay more. So we took the cheap way, and we dumped in the ocean. One problem after another, compounded and all interconnected, because we as a state could not or would not break loose from the grip of an unfair, outdated way of raising money. New Jersey is a state that, at its inception, borrowed from the European idea of taxation. In colonial days and in the early federal period, property was a good way to measure wealth, and so it was a fair way to determine someone's tax burden. But over time, other states came to understand the inherent unfairness of a system so out of step with modern thinking about wealth and the ability to pay. Today, when you ask a widow with a fixed income of $15,000 a year to pay a third of that in property taxes, you're not taxing wealth, you're taxing credibility. Property taxes come down to a direct tax on people's homes, and they are claiming an ever-growing share of household income. And perhaps most offensively, they are totally contrary to our notion that whatever tax burden we ask people to bear should be based on their relative economic well-being. New Jersey's 18th century property tax system is as unsuited to the waning days of the 20th century as it would be if we still denied people the right to vote if they were women or people of color. If we bring this awful system with us into the 21st century, I have no doubts that it will seriously endanger our ability to make sure that New Jersey offers to our children as good a life as it's offered to us. Let's look at two important facts that help explain where we are right now and why. One, New Jersey has the fewest square miles per municipality in the entire nation. In other words, we have more towns than other states do. And two, after the Second World War, when there was a big push around the nation to consolidate school districts, the number in our state grew. It is time to stop living a fantasy where we think that small is automatically better, when in fact, the price we pay is the duplication and inefficiency of maintaining 611 school districts and 567 totally independent municipalities awash in administrative redundancy. The bottom line cries out for more cooperation, coordination, and yes, regionalization. When home rule means that people make decisions on matters close to them, that's great. And we should never want to lose that. But when it means wasting money and overburdening people with property taxes because we cling to outmoded, expensive ways of thinking, and we refuse to tell the truth, then there has to be a better way. I believe we can preserve community involvement and also cut costs, and if we don't, shame on us. I know that if you have 3 towns with 3 police chiefs and you advocate merging police forces, you make one person happy and 2 of them very, very angry. And I know that that might not be the kind of arithmetic that wins elections. But I also know that people are fed up with the bills that they've been paying, and I believe that they're ready for the truth. I'm confident that leaders willing to explain this to the people will get a fair hearing. It often takes time for people to work these things through, but in the end, they do. When we started down the road we took in 1990, some observers, not all of them impartial, said that property tax relief that we fought for wouldn't happen. When they saw it start to happen, they said it wouldn't work. When they saw it working, they said that property tax relief wouldn't last. And they may be right. The politics of the moment has already swept aside some of it and reduced homestead rebates. But if we haven't totally solved the property tax problem, we've at least begun to address it. And we've put in place some important measures to enable us to move forward. During the past few years, one very important tool for fighting property taxes and promoting responsible development has been working its way through to completion. The state plan was begun in 1985 under Governor Kane and was finally approved in 1992. It is the backbone of the effort that I'm talking about here today. My last contribution to that effort took place this morning when I signed an executive order that will end the piecemeal implementation of our new state plan. It requires all agencies of state government to immediately begin to coordinate their actions with each other and with the objectives of the plan. The plan, as you all know, requires investment in housing and transportation and other fields to be concentrated in areas of designated higher growth. In protected natural and agricultural areas, investment will be more limited. The logic, it seems to me, is simple, and I think understood by most. If you put a wastewater treatment plant out in the middle of nowhere, guess what happens? Development, which you then have to pay to service. A sustainable future for New Jersey requires that we strike a balance between preservation and development. Wise development, not the growth without vision that was an unfortunate hallmark of the 1980s, is our goal. The state plan is a vision for growth. More than a colorized land use map for New Jersey, it is a vital living document, a roadmap, if you will, that will allow us to plan wisely, tax fairly, and measure the real cost of growth. Emergency room government was an approach that failed in the 1980s. The state plan is a good example of the kind of preventive care approach that the 1990s demand. Anticipating and acting to avoid problems before they occur is what we should be seeking. An approach that looks to the next generation, not just to the next election. President Lyndon Johnson once said, "We have talked long enough. We have talked for 100 years or more. It is now time to write the next chapter and to write it into the books of law." He was talking about civil rights. But we could just as well be talking about the state plan here in New Jersey. More than a framework for responsible growth, the plan is a tool for avoiding the mistakes that we now pay for with exorbitant property taxes. Indeed, by following the state plan and putting development in the right places, it's estimated that New Jersey taxpayers will save as much as $1.3 billion in capital costs over the next 20 years, and up to $400 million each year in operational costs. Under my executive order, the agencies of state government will act with a unified voice and pursue policies that reflect the goals of the plan when it comes to investing state resources. And within the next 2 years under the order, state agencies will also assist municipalities in designating the centers where growth should occur, and assist our hard-pressed cities in developing strategic revitalization plans to fight property taxes and to make sure that development in New Jersey makes sense for people. We cannot retreat from the state plan and where it points us to. As I near the close of this address and this administration, I want to say to you that every day when I walk into my office, I can't help but glance at the portraits of the governors who held this office before me. When you see those faces, it reminds you that you are one in a long line of people who have served. And it affects the way that you do the job. It instills a sense of pride and responsibility. It motivates you to do your best. Standing in this chamber today takes me back to when I first arrived in Trenton some 25 years ago. First as a legislative aide, and then as a member of the General Assembly. Governor Cahill, who is with us here today, was the governor then. Over the years, he and I have become very, very good friends, and he's provided me with very good advice. Like me, his string of annual messages ended at 4, and like me, he bore the scars of a battle over taxes. So I have a sense of how Governor Cahill must have felt when he stood on this very spot in January of 1974 and said, "Today we do not have a personal income tax, and in that fact some of our political colleagues take pride. But my friend, we have not yet reduced the property tax in New Jersey." Bill, we're continuing to move forward because of the work that you did and the steps that were taken by Brendan Byrne and Tom Kean. But progress comes in fits and starts, everything in its season. I know, too, how Governor Cahill felt when he said, like most battles, the loss is greatest in the first assault. And many of us have suffered personally as a result of our effort. But then he went on and said, "We were right then, and while many describe it as our worst defeat, I believe it is our finest moment." I'm thinking also of the words of another New Jersey governor, Woodrow Wilson, who once said, "I would rather lose in a cause that will someday win than win in a cause that will someday lose." Ladies and gentlemen, short-term expediency as a way of avoiding the long-term public interest is, in the ultimate reckoning, a sure thing losing cause. In the still early years of the 1990s, pundits speculate as to whether making difficult decisions means you won't get a second term in office. But when this decade is finished, that will not be the story. When the story of the 90s is written, it will turn out to be the story of men and women who confronted challenges and rejected easy patchwork solutions. Some of them will win elections, some of them will lose elections. But we will all move closer to the world we want for our children. If we will but rise above the politics of the moment, if we will but rise above the anger and the disruption that come inevitably in the wake of change, and rise above the temptation to define community in a narrow, selfish way. I believe that we will do these things. I believe that because we know that the need to do them is greater than any price that we pay. I've been honored to be your governor. I thank you. God bless you all.
So Governor Jim Florio concludes his fourth and final State of the State message as the Governor of New Jersey. Pausing to shake hands on his way out to former Governor Bill Cahill, who was also New Jersey's only one-term governor. In recent times, he's now shaking hands with members of the legislature Republicans and Democrats. The governor spoke for nearly 15 minutes. He received prolonged applause coming in. He's receiving it now as he leaves. The governor said he was proud of the accomplishments of his administration. He paid an emotional salute to his wife Lucinda, and he told members of the legislature that property taxes still threaten the future of New Jersey, and he warned that the state should take steps to avoid property taxes doing further damage.
Almighty God,
now we have the
we
benediction.
ask your blessings on all of us who are gathered here. We ask you to particularly bless Governor Florio and those who served us well over the last 4 years. Give the blessing to these senators, to these assembly persons, who are charged with moving our state forward, caring for the well-being of its citizens. Keep them always loyal and true to their oaths. Support them with your love and understanding.
And I'm Kent Manahan. Welcome back here to our NJN studios, where we'll be discussing, for the next brief period of time anyway, Governor Florio's fourth and final State of the State address with Roger Bodman and Jim McQueenie. Gentlemen, as Larry Stupnagel just said, the property tax theme was certainly evident in this address today, but also the governor used the occasion to again justify his actions in tax reform in New Jersey, and certainly the tax reform that many would argue led to his downfall and not having a second term in office.
Right. I think there was sort of an underlying theme here, Kent, and it was something to the effect that courageous acts cost elections. And I think he was sort of admonishing the body politic, for lack of a better term, not the legislature, but those of us that are listening and interested in these things, that we should take a longer term view of the major policy issues that face the state.
I think one of the things about the speech is that it was blunt, and I think it was very truthful about property taxes really being an inappropriate way, an anachronistic way of really funding the needs of the state, and is a form, I think, as he was suggesting, of fiscal discrimination, if you will. He gave several personal examples of individuals who had paid off their mortgage but were threatened by losing their house by taxes. I'm a little perplexed by one thing. This kind of speech, I still would raise, why was this kind of speech not given earlier in the term?
And I have the answer for you, Jim. It's because what I just said, courageous acts cost elections. And I don't necessarily agree with everything he said here, let me say that. You know, he talks about difficult decisions. Christy Whitman would argue whether they were correct decisions, and some of us, the Republicans, would do the same. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is that he takes a frontal attack on home rule in this speech. He talks about the state guide plan. He talks about consolidation of services, consolidation of school districts.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Nothing's wrong with it, other than the fact that it's politically volatile, and you and I know it, and therefore
so
that's.
Property tax reform was too politically volatile?
I think the not property tax reform per se, Kent, but the fact that the attack on home rule, and by definition, if you break up 567 towns and make it 267,
you're not popular.
You're not popular, and it causes political headaches and so forth. I was interested to see that Senate Minority Leader John Lynch also raised this issue of school district consolidation. Jim, is that a Democratic Party position?
I'll tell you, I think it's a wave of what's going to happen. You've got to find the money where it is.
Well, it has been going on little by little in New Jersey.
You know, one of the difficult
things.
It's a
good idea.
Well, one of the difficult things is you go try to find this money, and you hear a governor departing a term, lamenting the fact that he tried to do the right thing and make changes. You're faced with people who want the best schools, but then vote down school budgets out there. So the politics is very real, as Roger says, and it's a thing that Christie now encounters on her watch.
Well, Tip O'Neill recently said, or said in the past, he just recently died, rest his soul, that all politics is local, and I think that's very true.
Well, gentlemen, we're going to take a break in our coverage this afternoon of Governor Florio's State of the State address, and we'll be back with more in just a moment. Stay with us.